Hi, this video is about vectors and matrices. If you look up on the internet for information on vector and matrices, you're probably likely to get some kind of a graph and a transformation and things like that. And that's difficult to conceptualize and to relate to everyday life, right? Because we don't go around thinking about graphs and transformations, and it's hard to understand why we would even use vectors and matrices at all. So the purpose of this video is try to treat vectors and matrices as more like everyday objects and more like ordinary numbers, so that we could possibly learn how to use them and make them more easily understandable. So let's get started. um, let's look at frogs. Okay, a frog has one mouth and two eyes. So if I were to ask how many mouths and eyes would three frogs have, the answer would be easy, right? Because then you would just multiply one mouth by three frogs equals three mouths, and you would multiply two eyes with three frogs to get six eyes, like that. So, but solving that problem is like really solving two problems. Kind of together, two similar problems, right? What if there's an easy way? What I can do is I could take the number of eyes or mouths and eyes and create a vector out of them. So now I have a vector of one mouth and two eyes, and I would just draw them like this or write them like this, with mouths on top and eyes on the bottom. It doesn't really matter the order, but I'm just going to do it like this. And I create a vector like this. And now I can say, well, I want to multiply this thing. Okay, but now we're going to treat this as a thing, as one thing by 3, this vector by 3. And what we'll end up with is 3 mouths and 6 eyes. And you can see here pretty easily that multiplying a number and a vector is really multiplying the number with every element in that vector. Okay, so that's just the mathematics of this thing. And in this video, I'm not going to cover every like the whole operations with vectors and matrices. You'll find them pretty easily online, and but what I'm trying to do here is trying to show you that it actually makes sense to have all these operations, and kind of show you that you can use those operations to do real life things. Okay, and what I'll do here is I'll just use Python to do these calculations, so that I'm not like trying to make up stuff. This is real thing going on here. So with this is I can create, so but in this case I'm going to create a vector with 1 and 2, so that's one mouth and two eyes. And I'm just going to multiply that vector by 3. And you'll see that's multiplication symbol right there. I'm not doing anything fancy. And I'll end up with 3 mouths and 6 eyes. All right. If multiplying 3 by a vector is not terribly exciting, let's make it more interesting. Let's say I can sell a mouth for $2 and an eye for $3. The question is, how much money would I get if I sold the frog for parts? Well, that's more complicated now, right? Because now I have to say, well, I have one mouth per frog, and I'm going to sell that for $2, and so I get $2. And then I have 2 eyes per frog, but I'm getting $3 per eye, so that's 3 times 2 equals $6 for all my eyes. And at the end, I'm going to add up my mouth dollars and the eye dollars to get the entire frog, which is $8. Okay, so the answer is 8, but that involves 2 multiplications and an addition. How can I make it easier? Well, I could set up another vector with 2, which is the number of dollars or the amount of money I could get for my mouth, and $3, that's the dollar amount I would get an eye, and I can multiply. And if you think about it, if I multiply my price, so this is my price, right? 2 and 3. This is my price. Multiply my price with the number of body parts I have, which is the other one, which is my frog, 1 and 2. So if I multiply 2 and 3 and 1 and 2, and I should get the final total dollar amount, right? Yeah. So right here I have set up here on the left side, I have $2 per mouth, $3 per eye. This is whole vector. I'm putting in these units so you can see that units do cancel out. So this is this is just like very simple math here. So $2 per mouth, $3 per eye times 1 mouth and 2 eyes, and I will actually end up with $8, just like that. So I'm going to do that with Python, and you can see that I'm just setting up my price. I'm setting up my price with $2 and $3, and I just multiply by frog, and I end up with 8. In this case, I'm using that dot notation, which is the @ sign. That just means multiplication, using vectors. Okay. Also, I could do not just a dot product of 2 vectors. I can also use something called the multiplication with matrices. But in this case, I have to make sure that the number of columns on the left side of my multiplication equals the number of rows on the right side. And I will still end up with $8. So in this case, if I want to transform my vertical vector into kind of like the horizontal matrix, I would do a transformation, instance in .t here, and then all I'm going to do is multiply this with the frog. I still end up with $8. And before we go on, just one more note here, that if you see I'm trying to take the dot product of 2 vectors, the number of elements in each vector must be the same. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense, right? Because if I have I need the dollar amount per mouth and the number of mouths, and I need the one for eyes. If I have 3 elements on the left, which is mouth, eye, maybe a nose, then I have the dollar amount for the nose, but if I don't have the number of noses on the right side, then I can't compute anything. So it is important to have the same number of elements on the both sides before we could take the product. Now let's take a look at the Cyclops. The Cyclops has only 1 mouth and 1 eye. So if I had 1 frog and 1 Cyclops, how many mouths and eyes would I have? Well, to do that, it's pretty simple, right? Because I could set up my frog vector, which is 1 mouth and 2 eyes, and I can set up my Cyclops vector, which is 1 mouth and 1 eye, and all I have to do is add them up, and I would end up with 2 mouths and 3 eyes. Okay, so vector addition is really just adding the corresponding elements, as you can see here. The only difficult one is the multiplication one. So, and I suggest that you go and search up matrix multiplication and figure out the rules for doing that. Okay, so if I had 3 frog and 4 cyclopes, how many mouths and eyes would I have? Well, that gets complicated, but in our case, all we gotta do is multiply 3 by frog. I'm just gonna call this vector of the frog. And then plus 4 times the Cyclops. And I would get 7 mouths and 10 eyes, just like that. Okay? And not only that, we could put our frog body part count and the Cyclops body part count into a single matrix like this. On the left column, I have 1 mouth, 2 eyes for the frog. On the right side, I have 1 mouth and 1 eye for the Cyclops. And put all together becomes like a 2 by 2 matrix. And then we can put, in our case, number of creatures, which is 3 and 4. I have 3 frogs and 4 cyclopes in another matrix. And what I can do is, if you think about it, this matrix is the body part, right? The body part per creature matrix. And this is the number of creatures matrix. So if I multiply body part per creature times number of creatures, I will end up with the number of body parts, right? Right. So if you look at this, I am multiplying a matrix here with a vector here in this case. A vector is really just a matrix of just one column. That's what we call a vector, right? So we have a matrix multiplied by vector, and we end up with another vector, but in this case, the vector of my 7 mouths and 10 eyes. And we're going to show that with Python here. We set up my frog plus Cyclops, the body part matrix, and I'm setting up I'm going to call this the inventory, right? My inventory is the number of creatures I have. So if I multiply my creature, but in this case, it's just really like the number of body parts per creature times inventory, and I'm just going to do it, and here it is. I get my vector. Again, I can do this entire thing with one operation once I set up correctly. Now that I have 7 mouths and 10 eyes from my 3 frogs and 4 cyclopes, I am eager to sell them for money. And I already have my price list, which is $2 per mouth and $3 per eye. And I want to know how much money I would get if I sold my whole, inventory of frogs and cyclopes. And all I have to do is, again, I just multiply my creature, which contains the number of body parts, and inventory, which contains the number of creatures. And now I just multiply by price, which is the dollar amount for every body part. And boom, I get my $44. So this video is just trying to show you that you can use matrices like ordinary numbers, and all you gotta do is sort of set them up, combine them in the right way so that you could like solve more complicated problems with matrices by just doing ordinary mathematical operations. Well, thank you for watching, and I do recommend, if you're not familiar with the operations of matrices, just look it up and find out the rules. Then you'll kind of understand how we can multiply matrices and get our answers like this. Anyway, happy learning!